I'm Don Loftus. If you'd like to learn more about the Talking Out Festival or my play, please watch this video. I came from a broken home. My father left my mother and 3 kids when I was 8, and it really sort of devastated me. And I was a sort of a mediocre student and didn't really care much, and just sort of was struggling through it all. And a teacher, when I was in 8th grade, adopted me in a way, and she was taking a group of kids to New York. I grew up in Cleveland, and she was taking a group of kids to New York. We came from a rather poor neighborhood, so none of us really had money for a trip to New York or theater tickets particularly. And so she helped us raise money, and we would collect newspapers, we'd do this and that. And she took me to New York, and we saw 4 Broadway shows, which I remember like it was yesterday. And it absolutely, I was just stunned by it. And right then, thought I'm going to someday move to New York. I'm going to somehow be involved in theater, and it absolutely changed my life. And I came back to Cleveland, got in. She then directed a production of Oliver, which I was in, and then started doing community theater. When I was in high school, I did a lot of plays and a lot of community theater, and there was a thing that was advertised in, I think it was Backstage, a theater school in New York. It was $2,000 to go there for the summer. It was called the New York Academy of Theatrical Arts, not to be confused with the American Academy of Theatrical Arts. It was $2,000, which might have been $200 million. It was so much money at the time. And I raised the money, and I was so excited. And I found 3 roommates to room with in a 1-bedroom apartment in New York, and so on and so forth. And I show up the first day of school. There's a padlock on the door. There were like 1,000 kids out front who had all paid the $2,000. It was a scam. The guy had taken our money and ran away. There was no such thing as this school. And I came from all over the country. And so I couldn't go home. I was too embarrassed because everyone was so excited about me going to this school. So I couldn't go home to do it. So I stayed with these 3 actresses, one of which I had done shows with in Cleveland, for the summer, and I got a job working as a security guard at Modell's sporting goods store, which was ridiculous. And but through the summer, I watched them go to auditions, not get cast, get depressed. One got really seriously depressed, I think. And I thought, wow, if this is theater, as much as I love it, I don't think this is what I want to do. And I went back to Cleveland, finished school, and became a retailer. But through my whole career as retailing, I eventually became a vice president for the May Company, and then went on to work for Estee Lauder and had a big career. But through all of that, I continued to do theater. And I continued to write theater throughout and be in plays. A good friend of mine from 3rd grade on was Mark O'Donnell, who wrote Hairspray. And he and I used to write shows together, spoofs, and we would tape record them, and friends would do them and whatever. So all that combined sort of did. But even when I became a vice president, I was so concerned that my company would think I was not serious about my career, if they knew I was doing community theater, that I wouldn't tell anybody. And I would do theaters that were like far enough away from my store that they would, and every now and then there'd be somebody in the audience going, "Oh my God, I saw you on stage tonight. I had no idea that you did this," And so that was pretty much it. And then my wife and I moved to Boston to work for Estee Lauder. I eventually got to New York, and then I got very active through it all. I was writing plays. I would produce my own, I wrote a couple of musicals with a friend of mine who's a composer, and we would do equity stage readings of them and that sort of thing. And I eventually became the president of several companies in the cosmetic industry, Yves Saint Laurent, a Procter & Gamble company, and we had Versace and Gucci and Dolce & Gabbana and a lot of brands. And then finally I thought, what my real passion is theater. And so this is like act 2 for me. So I finished that career. I retired from that career, and I've been really, I approach my playwriting and and getting it out there as aggressively as I approach my career. I'm a maniac about submitting to theaters around the country. I do like 1,000 plays a year, submissions. And I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm on the board of the Dramatists Guild Foundation, which helps playwrights, in all stages of their career. So I love doing that as well. And I've met some great people and had some great experiences from it, and and enjoy every minute of it. I have to say that I'm working as hard as I did in my career, and I had a very good career, and I was, I'm very appreciative of all the mentors and all the people who worked with me. But I'm having so much more fun at this and making so much less money. There's not a lot of money in this, but it's a lot of fun, and it's my passion. It's what I love to do. I started with Mark O'Donnell, and that was fun. I mean, we had a good time. We would do crazy things like the school had done My Fair Lady that year, and they did The Diary of Anne Frank. So we decided to make a musical of The Diary of Anne Frank, but taking the music of My Fair Lady and just rewriting the lyrics, which was, frankly, very tasteless and terrible. And it was just sort of our own little tongue-in-cheek sort of thing. I got serious about writing probably when I was around 30, and got involved with this composer. We wrote 2 musicals together, and one of them we wrote a musical version that went into public domain when Pollyanna, this classic children's novel, went into public domain. We wrote a musical version of Pollyanna, and we had like grown men in the audience crying. And I thought, this is really great. And Mark's Hairspray had already opened and was a big success. He'd won the Tony Award and everything. And Mark sent his producer to see our reading, and she said, it has real merit, but I can't get behind this if you're going to continue to be an executive in the cosmetic industry. And my writing partner he ran a music school in Pennsylvania, and she said, you both have to give those careers up and focus on this if that's what you want to do. But I can't have a part-time playwright, kind of thing. And I wasn't ready at that point to walk away from my career, unfortunately. So I didn't. But we just did a revival of it 2 years ago. This was 20 years ago when we wrote this thing. We did a revival of it 2 years ago, and I think it still holds up. And in fact, with what's going on in the world today, it actually probably has more meaning today than it did even when we wrote it. That's another thing I really love about playwriting is when you go back and you read stuff that you wrote 10, 20 years ago, sometimes you go, oh God, what was I thinking? This is horrible. And then sometimes you're like, wow, this really has meaning. This can be really effective. When I lived in Cleveland, we had the Cleveland Playhouse, which was a big part of my early theater life too. And they had Hal Prince come one time as a speaker one night. And I loved Hal Prince. And I remember he said, when I go to the theater, I want to leave the theater a different person than I was when I walked in the door. I want to be affected by the play so much. Because one of the people had asked him, all your plays are so heavy. Why can't you just do something light and fun and comic and and that sort of thing? And he said, I have a wife who makes me laugh, and I have children who make me laugh at home, and that's all good. When I go to the theater, I want to leave a different person when I walked in. And I try to do the same thing with my plays. I write a lot of dramas, and I really want to touch a nerve. It's exciting for me when I watch the audience watching one of my plays, and I do make someone cry, or I do see them beam with happiness or whatever it might be. I think that's a big part of what theater does for us and why it's so exciting. I used to do a thing when I would have my sales meetings. And I would say to the audience, which is my sales force, I would say, can anybody remember the first play that you ever saw, the first live theater you ever saw? And, whether it was in high school or, your mom took you to Broadway, whatever it might be. And everyone in the room raised their hand. They absolutely could remember the first play they saw. I said, can you remember the first movie you ever saw? Nope. Can you remember the first television show you ever saw? Nope. But live theater is such a magical experience that it sticks with us, it changes us, hopefully, and particularly good theater. But it doesn't mean that it all has to be earth-shattering or tear-jerking. There are some wonderful Rodgers and Hammerstein and Lerner and Loewe musicals that just really do make you feel good, but you still grow from them, I think. And that's part of the passion I think that we all have. I love writing characters. I love developing characters. I think um, to find a human being or create a human being and put the words in their mouth, and the interaction between characters is just sort of also magical. I mean, I just think it's really really interesting. But I also like eavesdropping on buses. I mean, if I'm on a bus, I'm listening to the people, or at a at a restaurant, I'm listening to the people next to me because I'm just fascinated by human beings, I guess, and to put them on stage and to edit it. A big part of writing is not the playwriting itself. I mean, I probably have 29 different plays in various stages of development right now. It's getting it down on paper the first time, and then going back and editing it to make it crisp and flow and magical. And the other thing that I'm sort of fascinated with theater, and particularly musical theater, but is the arc and the that goes into to creating the perfect play. I mean, they say, like, for instance, in musical theater, it's said that there's the opening number that tells the audience where they're at, and and what they're about to see. It gives them some sort of hint. And then there's the 8-10 number, what they used to call the 8-10 number. Now musicals are less, usually 90 minutes long. But when musicals were 2 acts, there was the 8-10 number where the star comes forward and states their wants. It's the want song. So it's all I want is a room somewhere, or if I were a rich man, these kind of things. Or I'm going to get my kids. I'm going to get them out in Gypsy and so on. And then everything from that point, from the want song to the intermission, is brick walls being thrown up against that character, trying to prevent them, making it more difficult for them to achieve their want. And then it should peak there so that at intermission, the audience can't wait to get back in to see what happens. Does she get what she wanted, or doesn't she? Kind of thing. And then that is the whole second act. I'm sort of fascinated with that. And I learned that, like, for instance, screenplays are a completely different arc, that movies follow a completely different arc, as do novels, and so on and so forth. So it's very specific. And the unfortunate thing when you study theater is that as an audience member, that totally changes, because I'm sitting in the audience going, oh, there's the 8-10 number. Oh, there's the 11 o'clock number, and it's sort of the math sort of takes some of it away from me. But it's a fascinating art form. And, I think for all those reasons, I really enjoy it. The process I use in developing a play is I do this thing on Facebook every day called Obscure Facts of the Day. And it's things that happened in history and I do it really for myself. I mean, I have a lot of friends on Facebook who follow and make comments and so on, but I really do it for myself. And a lot of the stories that I've written plays about came from these things. For instance, there's a play that I wrote called Pear, and it's almost like the Lizzie Borden of Sweden. It's about this murder, and he killed his wife and chopped her up and put her in the fireplace. But his mom was involved in it, and it's because he and his mom had a relationship and blah blah blah. It's like this deep story, but anyway, it's a real story that happened in Sweden, and that's sort of I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Another play that I wrote was called the Springvale Armadillo. It's being done, in fact, it's being done tomorrow night in Florida on Zoom, and it turns out that back in the early, like, I guess the 1920s, there was a huge scare of leprosy in America, which I'd never known about. And this woman was taken, and what the story, and this was a story that was in the New York Times about this leprosy hospital that had been there for since the 20s, and it had leprosy's been curable since the 40s. And now it was the 80s, and they want to sell the prop. The government now owns this place. It's this sprawling hospital, and it had become a military hospital, become all these things over the years. But there were still like 5 octogenarians who were living there, that they didn't know what to do with, because when you were taken there, it was for the rich families of the South, and particularly with leprosy and the Bible, all the Bible stuff with the lepers and all that. It was a huge embarrassment if one of your family members should get this disease. So they would if you were rich enough, they would send you away. You go to this hospital, your name was changed, no one was allowed to visit you. Eventually the neighbors and whoever would forget that you even existed, and you just spent the rest of your life there. It was really a sad thing. Well, there's my lead character, which is somewhat fictionalized, but it's based on this story. She's now in her 80s, and she's lived her whole life there, and she's delightful in a way, considering what she's been through. And this young reporter from from the Boston Globe comes to interview her on survival. How does somebody survive this? And so on and so forth. And what it turns out is this is really taking place during the AIDS epidemic, and he's just found out that he's just tested positive, and he knows that he's about to, maybe the disease will materialize, maybe it won't, blah blah blah, and he's really there to get answers for himself. So it's a fairly heavy drama, but again, it's based on a story that I just came across. So that inspires me a lot. These stories that are based on actual history or whatever. I'm also sort of I wrote a play about that took place during this pandemic that we're going through, where a chorus boy. I had just seen West Side Story on Broadway. That was my last production that I saw on Broadway before all the theaters closed in New York, and it was an amazing production. And there were a hugely talented cast of total unknowns. These young kids from and it was very diverse casting. And I thought, God, how exciting for them they probably worked their whole life like I had dreamed about when I was 18 and 19. And now they're in New York, they're on a Broadway stage, and then boom, the whole thing shut down. So I wrote this play about this chorus boy who's lost his job and now has lost his apartment. He comes to the stage door one night. The theater's closed, as all theaters in New York are closed right now. And there's like a security night doorman, if you will, a night watchman. He bangs on the door and he convinces the man to let him live there, and because he doesn't have a place to live. And the old man, who's very reluctant at first, finally agrees. And it turns out he also lives there. He also is homeless, and he lives in the theater. And so some of it just is like it's inspired by real possible situations. I sat in this enormous Broadway theater and then when I walked home from the theater, I see all these homeless people. I thought, what a shame that theaters can't, they're warm, they have water, they can't open up, at least let these people sleep there, as opposed to sleeping out on the curbs, but anyway. So, so a lot of my inspiration comes from that. I love this festival, and I learned about it through, I know one of your other writers mentioned it on your podcast before. There's a thing called Play Submission Helper, and it was posted on there. It was also posted on the Dramatists Guild website as a submission opportunity, and it benefits mental illness awareness, and I think it's so worthwhile. It's really wonderful what Anthony is doing with this. And so the submission was to submit a play that had something to do with mental illness. And my mother had Alzheimer's, and I had written a play called Eddie and Edna, which is in the festival. Written it some time ago, from the point of view of the patient, if you will. So it was, Eddie is very, very confused. He has Alzheimer's or dementia, and he can't really sort out what's real from what's not, and including his family members. He's not sure which of them are even real and which are not. And it's a short play, and but that's what it's about. And I'm pleased to be part of this. The money raised for it will go for this this Alliance on Mental Illness as a donation to them, and it's a really worthwhile cause. So I'm excited about that. It starts. Eddie and Edna are an old married couple, and he's at the breakfast table just sort of in a daze, and she brings him his coffee, and he doesn't really respond in any way. And she says, Eddie, are you okay? And he's really getting annoyed because he knows there's something wrong with him, but he can't admit it. And he's like, why do you keep asking me that? What do you think's wrong with you? Do you think I'm sick in the head? Blah, blah, blah. And she's like, I just worry about you. I just want you to be okay, blah, blah, blah. And then she, at one point, the scene goes on a bit longer than that. She leaves the kitchen. There's a pounding at the door, and it's a young man who he's been asking about. It turns out it's their son. And he says, hey, Dad, don't you answer the door anymore? He goes, who are you? He has no idea who it is. And the son explains that he's their son. And he says, but she just told me you didn't exist. And he said, who told you that? Who's denying my existence? And he goes, Edna, my wife. And the kid goes, and my mother, Edna? He goes, yes. And he goes, when did she tell you this? And Eddie says, just now, she just was making me breakfast and she just told me. And the kid goes, Dad, you got to face it. Mom died 4 years ago. So you just, by the time you're sitting there as an audience member, and different people react to it differently. I don't ever really sort out what's real and what's not. I don't ever tell the audience that Edna is dead or isn't dead, or the son exists or doesn't exist. I just let them determine that for themselves. But it really is just to imagine what it must be like to be in that state and really have not being able to sort out the reality from what's fiction, and how frustrating that must be for the person themselves. And with my mother, in my mother's situation, fortunately, she was a happy victim of the disease. I mean, what was a bit strange for her kids was that she imagined herself almost childlike, and she thought everyone else was very old and that she wasn't. And she in fact was like 80 at this point. But she's like, I would say to her, we had to put her into a place, and I'd say, how are you doing here, Mom? She goes, I really like it. The food's really good, but everyone is so old. And then when my sister came in, she said, who is she? And I said, that's your daughter. That's Linda. And she said, God, she's so old. And I thought, she thinks she's like, a teenager or younger. It's just amazing. But she was happy. So I was happy. I mean, because others in the same place were, just miserable, so I would rather have, if it happens to me, I would rather have it go that way, I think. And with Eddie, in my play, it's the other way. I think he's very, very frustrated. I think it's to understand his frustration, because I think that it's hard on a family. It's and friends probably, but certainly hard on a family to watch a loved one go through this. But it also you get aggravated. You can't help but get aggravated because it's such a frustrating situation. And to just try to show patience and compassion, and if it's not your family, but it's a friend of yours who's going through this, to help the audience understand what that's like and what your friend might be going through while his or her family member is suffering with this. And so just I think to raise the awareness of how difficult this disease is. And I'd worked for one of my cosmetic companies was owned by a French pharmaceutical company. And I remember I went to a meeting with their doctors and scientists. And I asked them, I said, are they making any progress on this disease? Is there any progress being made on Alzheimer's or dementia? And he said, no. And he said, and frankly, we're not really working on it, because in order to get a drug through the FDA, you have to prove that you've actually cured the disease. And with dementia and Alzheimer's, until we do an autopsy, we're not even sure what the patient was suffering from. Like, they don't know if it's dementia. Now, this may have changed, by the way. This was a number of years ago. But at the time, he said to me, so because we can't develop a drug that the FDA will approve because we can't prove we've cured the disease, they stopped working on drugs for it, which I found really frustrating as somebody who had a family member who was suffering from it. But what we're going through now with this, looking for a vaccine for this virus that we're going through. They have to have a control group that doesn't know if they got the real vaccine or the placebo, and so on and so forth. And so it's that same process. And it takes, this will be different now with the virus and this vaccine thing, and what's going on now because the government's funding it. But it takes about, and again, this may have changed, but at the time, he told me it takes like $1 billion to get a drug developed, tested, and through the FDA. But then if the drug checks, it's worth a tremendous amount of money. I mean, the sales worldwide on a drug that solves a problem like that, it would be billions of dollars. So it's well worth it. But a lot of money goes down the drain on drugs that don't get passed, on vaccines that don't get passed. So anyway, it's a long way away from theater, but that's what that was. I've met some of the playwrights he had a sort of a pre-meeting, and I've met the actors who are doing Eddie and Edna. Now, I had Eddie and Edna done several times around the country, and I got to, it was pre-pandemic, so I actually went to see the productions. What's really interesting about this group is the two actors, the three actors, because there's the actors playing the son too. It's much heavier. I mean, they're playing it much. I mean, the play is serious and it's a drama, no matter who does it. But somehow it's more tragic with these actors. They're really sensational, and it's so I mean, that's what I'm looking most forward to, is to see their performance again. I've only seen one rehearsal, and to see to get the audience response. I've heard stories about Tennessee Williams, who, after he won the Pulitzer for any particular play, he still rewrote it. Even though the thing had already won the Pulitzer Prize, he was still re-editing. And I do that too after one of these, particularly when there's audience feedback. I get a lot of good ideas. They make, people make recommendations and whatever, or they tell me that they're confused about something, or that something took them out of the play. And so I will go back and correct that. So that's probably the first thing. I'm also anxious to see the work of the other writers. I met the writers, but I haven't heard their plays yet. So, and there's actually a female playwright also from Cleveland originally. I think she now lives in Seattle or something. She lives somewhere on the West Coast, but I'm anxious to see her play, just we both come from the same town and that sort of thing. So I think, you mentioned earlier about and several of your writers on your other interviews have talked about the collaboration process, and that certainly is a big part of it. It's you write in a the best place to write is in a room where there's absolutely no noise, no interference, and you just are in your own mind. But then when you bring it to a cast and turn it over to a director, it becomes such a collaborative process. And, sometimes more collaborative than others. I had a play years ago done in California, and I was notified after it was done. The director said, "Thank you we so enjoyed doing your play." So I called my friend Mark O'Donnell and I said, "Can they do that? Can they do my play without telling me?" And he goes, "There's an expression in theater, the only good playwrights are dead or out of town." So they don't really want you there. They don't want you going, "Oh, I meant for her hair to be blonder," or whatever, the playwright might have in mind. And the playwrights do have to be careful when it's your play and they can't change the words. But when you turn it over to a director, other than that, it's their play. And you really have to, I'm very, very careful about if I'm invited to a rehearsal, I give my comments privately to the director. It's then his decision whether he wants to take it or not, and he tells the cast about any changes that are made as a result of I would never go to a cast member and go, I meant for her to be a little, faster on that line or whatever. That's not my place anymore. That's now in the hands of the director. And with Anthony, who's producing and directing the Talking It Out Festival, during the rehearsal, he's and it's all on Zoom, of course, but he said, "Don, is there anything you want to say to the actors?" And all I can do is praise them. I mean, I would never give them direction. It's not my place. And they did an amazing job. I have to say, I'm really pleased with their work. The reason that 10-minute play festivals, and there's a shocking amount of them, and there's hundreds of them around the world. When I first, my first plays that I wrote and had productions of, or actually produced like equity stage readings myself, were all full-length plays. And I sort of scoffed at 10-minute plays. As I've been a part of them in the last 3 years, I've done many, many of them. First of all, it's a great way to introduce new voices to the world, and to the world of theater particularly. There are a lot of very talented playwrights out there who participate in these festivals who have not had a play on Broadway or off Broadway yet, but certainly have something to say. And I think it's a great training ground. You learn a lot. It's, a 10-minute play is not a Saturday Night Live skit. And I love Saturday Night Live. It's not a criticism of that. A 10-minute play, you've got to develop characters, develop the conflict, build the wall up, as I mentioned earlier, and find a solution in 10 minutes, and the audience has to believe it. And when they're well done, you are changed as an audience member. I mean, a well done 10-minute play can really be powerful. And like I said, they're not skits. They're not just, there's a difference between a skit and a play, and these are fully developed plots. And so I think the first thing is to give voice to emerging talent, that may be out there. It's a great opportunity for actors. There have been plays on Broadway, and the British female writer who I absolutely love, Carol, whose name I can't remember her last name, I'm so embarrassed. But anyway, she wrote a play that was 2 hours long, and it was just a series of 1 minute to 10-minute plays continuously, and the audience absolutely loved it. And so I think it's it's entertainment. It can be very entertaining, and I think people should support it because it gives actors a job, it gives playwrights a job, and it gives you an introduction to new talent that otherwise you would not see. I think that the audience must, and friends and family and theater lovers should really watch the Talking Out Festival, because I think the plays we all share one thing. It all has to do with mental illness. And when we look at what's going on right now in the world, and all the pressures and what everyone's going through, I mean, this is a really difficult time. And I'm 66 years old. I've never lived through anything like this, and I don't think most of us have. So, and the impact that it's having on us mentally, I know particularly like in New York for my single friends who are living alone. And they're used to. I have a friend who works. She'll kill me for saying this, but she works for Playbill, and she goes to the theater every single night. Her whole life has changed. It has just stopped, and she lives by herself. And when I talk to her, I can just hear it in her voice. She's just sad, and I think that this festival is so important. First of all, because it's a benefit. I mean, it actually it's giving money to this alliance for mental health. But it's also, I think, an opportunity for the audience to learn. So I think people must watch it to benefit themselves and maybe feel better about wherever they're at. I'm not saying that everyone's mentally ill as a result of the virus or the politics or anything else that's going on in the world, but certainly we're different than we were 4 years ago mentally. And I'm hoping the festival will help relieve some of that. Other than I'm excited about it and looking forward to it. This is my first year of participating in this particular one of the Talking Out Festival, but I love the idea that it's contributing to a cause too. I think that's I've done a couple. I've done plays for the Actors Fund and for the Dramatists Guild, raising money for those kind of things. But this is the first one I've been involved in where it actually reaches beyond theater people. And I mean, I have no idea about how much Anthony will raise as a result of this, but whatever it is, I admire him. I respect him for doing it, and I think it's exciting. I'm Don Loftus, and I'm the playwright for a play called Eddie and Edna. I'm honored to be part of the Talking Out Festival. If you've enjoyed this conversation, or if I've intrigued you in any way, I encourage you to go to the Talking Out Festival website. It's also on Facebook, and join us on the 21st at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you.